Oh, all right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Nutrition with Elena. Today we're going to be talking about sustainable eating. So, Elena, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. Today, we're going to talk about, like Erica said, sustainable eating. I'm going to first get started with a couple recipes because they're going to have some time spent in the oven while we're talking. So first, I'm going to get started with our roasted tomato and white beans dish. So what I'm going to start with, I have my tomatoes halved already. I'm going to put a tablespoon of olive oil into the bottom of my pan. And I'm just using like a roasting sheet, baking sheet. You can use, like my Pyrex was just in the dishwasher, so I didn't get a chance to use that. But I'm just going to put a tablespoon down in my pan, and then we're going to add the tomatoes. I'm just going to mix these up a little bit. This is a great dish to make if you have any leftover cherry tomatoes that people are giving you or you're getting from the CSA or local farms. They're so good this time of year. Great. So we have our tomatoes. Now I'm going to add in a clove of garlic. If you really love garlic, you can certainly kick it up and use more. I'm just going to stick with a clove. This in here. And then we're going to add in about a quarter teaspoon of salt. I'm going to use a little bit of a coarser sea salt, just so it has a little bit more kind of texture to it. Try to get it in here. So I'm using an 1/8 teaspoon. I only have the quarter teaspoon container, so I'm just going to fill this one halfway. And then we're going to do a couple cracks of black pepper. I used about a pint of cherry tomatoes halved. And then we're also going to use some crushed red pepper or red pepper flakes. And I'm just going to kind of spread this around. Okay, I'm going to give it a stir. And then we're going to pop this into the oven for 20 minutes. I have it preheated to 375 already. Great. Okay, so while that's in, we're going to just set a timer for 20. Great. All right, and now we're going to work on our quiche. So when we're talking about sustainability, like we see this, these tomatoes, this red tomato, cherry tomato dish, great this time of year because we can use locally sourced produce in our area in August. And then we're going to talk a little bit about plant-based and how that can really, make our diets a little bit more sustainable. But we're also going to incorporate in some eggs, which we know we can get locally from farms. There's not a whole lot of space needed for, to have a good supply of eggs. They can be a really nice, sustainable food choice if we're incorporating in some animal protein into our diets. So I am going to, so this quiche recipe is super easy. I always just start off, I'm just going to put a little bit of olive oil in my pan just to help with a little bit of sticking and I'm going to just rub it around with a brush. You could also use a spray if you have a spray. So basically the kind of recipe for this is we're going to do a cup of vegetables and then we'll do a cup of veggies and a half, 4 eggs and 1 cup of, or half cup of milk. And you can use that kind of recipe for different types of veggies, really whatever you prefer. So this is nice with spinach. It's nice with like a yellow squash, broccoli. You can do a mixture of vegetables. So I was chopping up my zucchini. I did choose to do zucchini today because it's really growing a lot in this area right now. You could also just double it if you want to use, I'm going to use, you know, the 9x9 inch pan, but if you want to use more like a 13x9, you can just double the recipe. Great, so we're going to do that. I'm just going to put that in the bottom of my pan. I have some little green onions. I'm going to just add these in as well, just to give it some additional flavor. Let's take off the outer layer. Off to peel. So we're just going to chop these up a little bit. We're just going to put them in with the zucchini. And you can also add herbs, really whatever kind of flavor profile you're looking for with this recipe. Real quick. Great. All right, now we're going to do our eggs. So let me get those in here. So we're going to do 4 eggs. And I rinse off my hands. Great. Then we can just whisk in. We're going to whisk in a half cup of low-fat milk. And let's do some pepper, just a couple cracks of pepper. I'm going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then what we're going to do is just pour it right on top. Great. And then I'm just going to throw this in the oven. Put some optional cheese on top if you like, but this to me is good enough, and it's a nice, let me throw it in and then we'll talk more. That can even be a quick dinner. If you know, need something fast, very quick, you can pair it with some like whole grain toast. I really like, I don't know if we've talked about this, but so Ezekiel bread's really nice, but it's a little pricey. So that's found usually in the freezer aisle of the grocery store. I really like the Aldi's brand Knock Your Sprouts Off bread. It's very similar and it is a lot cheaper. It is not in the frozen section, but what I do like to freeze it just because there aren't many preservatives, so it does tend to spoil a little bit faster. So, you might have some of that with a little, piece or two of whole grain toast and some fruit, and that could be a really nice, easy dinner. All right, so let's take a peek at our slides and check so our tomatoes need about 12 more minutes, then we'll pull them out and we'll mix in our beans. So when I was doing my slides, I was like, they're kind of, the idea was kind of similar to what we did last month when we did more of a local eating talk. But I think we'll kind of talk through some additional things that we maybe didn't cover, and hopefully some different fresh ideas are going to be in here. I tried to kind of make it a lot different than last time. So we're going to cover reasons for eating sustainably and then just review some resources. So the benefits of sustainable eating, we see the environmental impact. So maybe less resources used, less travel needed for our foods. There's also a health impact. So we find that eating sustainably can kind of lead to more nutrient-rich diets. And that social impact, we talked a lot about that last time, that like voting with our dollar, right? Supporting our local farms so that they can stay open and continue to grow food for our communities. So some principles of sustainable eating, and then we'll kind of break down each one. The first one's eating more plants, reducing animal product consumption, minimizing food waste, choosing sustainable seafood, and then supporting local and seasonal foods. So eating more plants. So we know that there's a little bit of a smaller footprint when plant foods are grown versus maybe the amount of plant foods that are needed to sustain animals that are being grown. Not to say that we shouldn't or can't eat any animal products, but having a little bit more of a plant focused diet, does promote like more sustainable food choices, basically. So when we're talking about plants, we're talking about whole grains and legumes, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. And if we're looking to reduce animal products, we still want to focus in on our protein intake. So we want to make sure we're still getting adequate protein. So protein is very important for everybody, but specifically for people kind of healing from any surgeries or like maybe healing from radiation therapy. Also, as we age, we tend to need a little bit more. So people under 65 years of age need a little less than people 65 years of age and older. And it's mainly just that we're losing muscle mass every decade after the decade of 30. So, once people hit 30, the muscle mass starts just naturally decreasing and we kind of have to fight to keep it up, right? So having enough protein and then also incorporating in some weight strengthening exercises. So some plant-based protein sources, probably our highest ones are tofu and tempeh. So tempeh is, I think we did a recipe at some point with tempeh, but it's a fermented soy product. Whereas tofu, I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's like they take soy milk and kind of um, get it reduced down to like a block of concentrated soy protein, basically. So it's a good bit of protein in the tofu. And then we have legumes or also pulses. So that's kind of something else they go by. And pulses include lentils and peas. And then nuts and seeds and whole grains have some plant-based protein. Veggies and fruits still have a little bit, but it's really nothing significant. The second thing to kind of look at is minimizing, or I think it's the third, minimizing food waste. So the average person wastes about 400 pounds of food each year. So some ways to reduce that, we can kind of take inventory of what we have before we head to the store. So, we might not need to buy, we might be able to swap out something. So say we have a recipe that's calling for eggplant, but we have some zucchini, swapping out the eggplant for the zucchini, or kind of just seeing what you have on hand versus always buying everything, that you need for recipes. Creating a meal plan can be super helpful. So then we can kind of pull from what we have and utilize some of that. Storing leftovers properly and using them. So, getting those things in the fridge or freezer, just so that we're able to actually use our leftovers. And then we can process our fresh produce for later use. So if you wanted to do, if you have some excess of, for example, peaches, you can go get, around me, I can go get a big like bushel of peaches right now, but obviously like they're going to go bad. And I actually did have some go bad last week. I wasn't following my own rules, but you could always peel them and freeze them, and then they can be used, for smoothies or just thaw them out and enjoy like a nice peach taste when the winter time comes and we're really not getting any fresh produce that tastes good. This was a nice website, and I'll just I'll hit it real quick. So this Zero Waste Kitchen, I found that they had some really neat recipes, just like things you wouldn't think of. I'm not sure about the banana skin stuff. I don't know if I'm going to go there, but the zero waste curry and some ideas for gardening and composting, storing different foods. I kind of thought there was some cool stuff on here, a nice little blog. Some other things that we might do, vegetable scraps. So we might have a container going in the freezer that we're putting all of our vegetable scraps in. And then we can get it going with making it into like a vegetable stock. So that can be a really great idea. Making a frittata with leftovers. So if we have some different types of leftovers, mixing in eggs and, kind of cooking it like in a pan, or we can even make it like an omelet or scrambled eggs with it. Making croutons with stale bread. And then definitely utilizing that freezer. So the freezer is a really nice option for our leftovers. And even just like portioning it out if we're by ourselves and we're not eating, like maybe we make a big pot of soup or stew when the weather turns and is a little cooler. We can always, portion some out and freeze it. And then if we portion a couple meals out and freeze them, we have some variety to pick from if we need a quick meal. Choosing sustainable seafood. So there are ways to kind of move more towards choosing sustainable seafoods, choosing the seafood that isn't being harvested in a way that's kind of depleting the ocean or the species. So there's some different ways to go about this. We can look for some certifications. So there's some wild caught seafood certifications we can look for, some labels for farmed seafood, and then like aquaculture. I really like, so choosing seafood lower on the food chain. So sardines, anchovies, mackerel, I always feel like sardines kind of have gotten a bad rap over the years, a bad rap, because I feel like people kind of categorize them with anchovies, which I know kind of look a little look a little strange to some people, but sardines are actually really tasty. And I put them sometimes in different like sautés and things. Maybe like if I do um like some onions and tomato and eggplant and like sardines in that, and maybe serve it over some whole grain pasta. It has a really nice flavor and it's not super fishy. I find that it's just a nice savory taste. And they're inexpensive, and being lower on the food chain makes them a little bit more of a sustainable choice. They also tend to be a little lower in like mercury and things like that, just because they're just eating the plants, whereas the bigger fish tend to be eating them, and they can kind of build up more of those contaminants in their bodies. And then avoiding overfished species. I really like this website, the Seafood Watch. This is out of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It's about 2 minutes left. And what they do is kind of create guides that, you can kind of look what are our best choices. So let's see. Let's look up our best choices of seafood. So it's going to give you the different types of seafood and kind of give you the recommendation of what's the best option. So I know these aren't super popular here at the top. Let's find something a little bit more popular. Catfish, no. So clams, this can be something that people might have this time of year. So it says buying farm clams is great. Buying wild caught clams harvested in the US or Canada seems fine. So they are a good choice. So they don't have a risk of, depleting the species. They don't seem to have much issue with contamination. So they seem to be a good choice. Let's look at salmon. But that's a little bit more popular, and let's get some different questions on salmon. Let me scroll, just find it this way because I feel like the other way isn't great. Salmon. So some recommendations of what to buy. So that US wild caught salmon seems like a good choice. Atlantic salmon that's specifically farmed in Maine might be harder to find. So looking for the labels. And it is saying avoiding some Atlantic salmons. You can get wild caught salmon canned, which can be really nice to use. And actually the wild caught salmon I've seen back when I was closer to Trader Joe's. They used to have that in the frozen area. I don't know if they still do, but this is just kind of a fun way to just play around and get some different ideas of what might be good, better choices than others. All right. And then also supporting local and seasonal foods, right? We talked a lot about this last month. So visiting farmers markets, sourcing produce directly from farmers. So we talked about that localharvest.org website. All right, I'm going to pull out my tomatoes and we're going to add in our beans. These are so incredibly yummy. If you've not done this before, they are really tasty. So we're going to add in our beans. So you can really use any type of white bean. I'm using cannellini, but you can use like the smaller white beans or the Great Northern beans. Just gonna drain and rinse these. This recipe is actually a really nice, even just like a snack. It's so tasty. So I'm just going to stir this up. And then we're going to put it back in for about 10 more minutes. And that'll time real nicely with the other recipe we have going in there. Great. Okay. So we did talk about the localharvest.org and then joining a CSA. So that's another thing that you can search right on this website. And then, of course, growing your own is always an option. And then kind of donating what we grow, right? So if we have kind of an excess of produce that we've grown, up by me, there's like one of the libraries has set up with a grow a row donation. So you can take in extra produce there. I know sometimes the food, like oh my gosh, First Harvest, I think is the name of like the food pantries. They'll take donations as well. So that can be a really nice way to kind of promote the local and seasonal foods. So making some sustainable choices. So plant-based meal ideas. We can try a meatless Monday, excuse me, or a meatless Tuesday or whatever day of the week you want to do that with. Some ideas might be like breakfast options, a bean hash. And I know we've made that like several months ago in class. Bean hash, maybe like a tofu scramble, if you've ever seen those. There's a lot of really nice recipes online for that, but it's kind of like tofu that you'll just break apart, and you can even put some turmeric in to make it yellow, and then kind of scramble it with like vegetables, and it just kind of resembles scrambled eggs, but you're going to get some of that nice like the protein from the tofu, and you can find some ways to really make it very flavorful. Obviously, this time of year, chili can be really nice. And I've actually used tempeh. And I know when we did tempeh, I believe we crumbled it up and used it in a recipe. But you can crumble that up and put it in a chili. So you have even a little bit more protein, and you're getting that fermented soy product into that recipe. And it kind of has that same, like a little bit of a texture of like a ground meat. Lentil shepherd's pie. So you can find some recipes on that are really nice. You can even swap out, like I've done one with lentils and like sweet potato instead of the white potatoes, which the white potatoes are fine, but the sweet potatoes and the lentils just kind of give it a little bit of a different feel. And then salads with plant protein. So, maybe having some type of like seasoned tofu on a salad, or the beans, nuts, seeds, all of those great things. So some ideas for sustainable grocery shopping: making a list, bringing in reusable bags and containers. If you have a store that has more like a bulk aisle for the containers, that can be a really nice option. Buying things in bulk. So if we're buying kind of larger amounts, and if we know we're going to use, say, X amount of oats over the course of a couple months, maybe we would buy the big rolled oat container instead of like the smaller ones, or a bigger bag of rice versus smaller, different things that we can do to kind of help with reducing packaging. And then when we choose whole foods, they just tend to naturally have less packaging than highly processed and overly packaged items, right? So, if we're buying, fresh apples, for example, versus like a lot of little containers of applesauce, that can be an example of less processed. And we can even do our own applesauce this time of year. Like if you do come across a larger amount of apples, I like to just put them in the crock pot and just basically turn it on, maybe just with a tiny bit of water, and it will cook and it'll soften, and you can just mash it with a masher and keep it in the fridge, and you have a really tasty homemade applesauce. And then making sustainable choices when eating out. So we want to look for restaurants that support local farmers if we can. And that localharvest.org, you can search out restaurants on there and it will show you places that use local foods. We might try a vegetarian or a vegan dish when we're out. And there is an app called the Purple Cow. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. I think it's the Purple Cow. But that is, let me just double check for you. Just give me 1 second. Purple Cow. Yeah. Oh no, it's called Happy Cow. That's Happy Cow, but it's like a picture of a purple cow. Anyway, that app, you can put a zip code in and it'll show you vegetarian or vegan restaurants that have vegetarian or vegan options. And then trying independently owned restaurants, because that does help support our local economy as well. And at this point, there doesn't seem to be a huge price difference in the two, like either chains or local. And then some recipes. So obviously we went through these a little bit last time, but some seasonal recipes. I like thekitchen.com. They had some summer, like you can put in whatever season you're in and you can find some nice options for seasonal recipes. The plant-based RD blog has some Simple Green, and then Forks Over Knives is just always a good resource for like just plant-based recipes in general. Great, so I'm going to stop sharing. And we're going to have about 3 minutes until we're going to grab that stuff out. Does anybody have any questions in the meantime?
I do. The
Sure.
thing that I waste the most, and I feel incredibly guilty about it, and I was really looking forward to this workshop because I hope you have some suggestions,
Sure.
is spinach. I just can't eat an entire bag of spinach before it starts to get soggy. Yeah. You have any ideas of what I can do with it before it gets to that point?
Yeah, I would say when you feel like it's going to start getting to that point, I would just kind of cook it down, and like that large volume turns into like this much spinach, and then you can just eat it as like a side. That's generally a good way to use it. And I mean, you could always freeze it if you wanted to, but I think cooking it, and really how I do it is I'll just put like a little water in a pan and keep it on low and just kind of keep moving it around until it starts wilting, basically. Yeah. But yeah, it does, like those big containers, if you're using them for salads, they do kind of faster. They take longer to use. You can also throw some in a smoothie. I always find that spinach in a smoothie really goes a long way, just because it doesn't really change its taste. It just changes the color. So you could even freeze like portions that you might use in a shake.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. See a couple options with that spinach. Great. Any other questions? I went through that a little quickly. All right, well, let's take a peek at our bean dish. I'm going to pull that out, and then we'll pull out our quiche in a minute. Great. So they're doing what I wanted them to do. So you can kind of see the beans are like splitting. So they're almost like drying out a little bit. It just kind of gives a different texture to maybe what we're used to with beans. And it just ends up being a really tasty treat. So either eating this hot, I've had it over some pasta before, which has been really tasty. And even maybe over like barley or something like that. Just a lot of really nice options that we can do with that specific dish. And this might even be a dish that you can throw some spinach in as well, like just kind of when it's getting closer, like almost when you put the beans in, you can throw some spinach on top and that will like wilt and you can mix that in too. Great. I'm going to take a peek at the quiche. I'm not sure that it's ready quite yet. So I'm probably going to put it in for another 5-ish minutes, but you can kind of see how pretty it is, right? The vegetables rise to the top, and I think it's just a really pretty look. So this, again, is a really nice, basically like a quarter of this would be a serving. And like I said, you can have it with some whole grain toast, maybe, a side of some fruit, something like that, for either a breakfast or a dinner or quick lunch, whatever works best. This would also freeze okay. So you could, portion it out and pop it in the freezer for another day. So I'm going to pop it back in just for a couple more minutes. Wonderful. Anything else you guys can think of for today?
So I had a quick question about, I know this comes up a lot with, you mentioned, when you're having like, say, meatless Monday or whatever, and you mentioned a lot of the protein alternatives. So some of them are made from soy products.
Yeah.
There was at one point a lot of research saying, or you would hear that there was research saying breast cancer patients should not have soy products. So can you kind of maybe dispel that myth a little bit that it's okay to eat? Is it okay to eat that, I guess, and why or why not?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, there was talk, we would kind of people would even hear it from their oncologists years ago, like don't have soy. And unfortunately, I think some people are still hearing that occasionally, but the research does not support avoiding soy. It actually shows, at the very least a neutral effect, if not like some benefit. So, but we always recommend incorporating it in more of kind of a traditional way, like Asian cultures might consume it. So that would be like 1 to 2 servings of whole soy foods each day. So that would be whole soy foods. Soy foods would be tempeh, tofu, edamame, soy milk. So it might be like a portion of, a deck of card size portion of tofu or tempeh, or a cup of soy milk, or a cup of, edamame in the pods. So really leaning more towards those whole soy food options and really trying to not incorporate in a lot of kind of processed soy products like, the soy burgers and, soy protein powders and bars and things like that. So if people are looking for kind of a plant-based protein powder, sometimes they'll have like other different types of blends you can get. They might have some pumpkin seed mixed with some pea protein, mixed with some like chia seed protein, or just chia seeds, hemp, things like that. So as for like a powder, moving more towards something like that, if you need extra protein, and focusing in on the food sources, which would be like our whole soy foods. And like for veggie burgers, looking more for something, if we're buying like a processed veggie burger, more like something like the Bubba veggie burgers, if you've ever seen those. Those are nice in that they're just like oats, beans, and vegetables. So kind of looking more towards something like that if we want to buy a prepared veggie burger.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Anything else? And if you guys want more information on the soy piece, I'm going to give our ONDPG. Let me look it up real quick. Hold on, so I can type the right website in. There's an oncology dietitian's website.
And while she's looking that up, I will give you a teaser that next month is going to be mental health and nutrition. So that should be really exciting. Looking forward to that.
Yes. All right, so that is the website, and there's some more information on there regarding soy and cancer and a lot of other different topics as well.
Okay, so it's oncologynutrition.org.
Mhm.
Perfect. Mhm.
Great.